Hi, I'm Maria Davidson.
And I'm Rich Davidson, and you're watching Off Topic,
Life After 40.
Cue the intro.
Hi, everybody. Today we are talking about political and religious diversity within the family dynamic and within friendships. How to maintain great relationships even when you don't agree on anything. So I wanted to start by a quote, and it's a two-part quote. The first part is maybe well known, I don't know. And I apologize, I have to read it. The first duty of love is to listen. And this was said by Paul Tillich. So Paul Tillich said that. And I thought, that's great. It actually is true. When you love one another, listening has to be part of the equation. And then my sweet and dear friend Hannah added, to listen with the intent to understand. And I thought, actually, that's much more important, because I think that's the biggest issue that we face today is sometimes we listen with the intent to force someone else to listen to us. So I listen to you, now you've got to listen to me.
And I think even more than that, I've heard a lot of people talk about this subject, and I remember watching a video not too long ago from Jordan Peterson, and he talked about communication, about listening. And his idea was how most people communicate isn't really listening to the other person. They basically say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with you, and I'm going to tell you why I'm right. And I'll win if you agree with me. But that's not really a conversation. I don't even know what that is. I guess maybe you're trying to impress somebody, or you're trying to dominate them in a conversation because you want to come out being right. But that's not listening. And I think as parents, we have older kids that are pretty opinionated. Very idealistic, as you would expect them to be.
I would think more to the point is that we have varying positions on politics in our home. And I know that this is not the case in every home. I know that this is not the case with every relationship. So most people tend to gravitate towards like-minded people. They enjoy conversation where everybody supports everybody. And I think that's great. But I think it limits our relationships to having no challenges in life. And having people with diversing, is that a word?
Close enough. I know what you mean.
But having people who have various points of view actually can help educate us and help us understand where someone else is coming from, in a way we never thought of before.
Well, in a way, you look at our political system, and you look at basically how the Western civilization is predicated, and it's the exchange of truth. And you don't get that if you're talking to somebody who's like-minded. That's not to say you shouldn't have those conversations, because it is helpful when you're in a group of people that believe the same way you believe, because it can help you to strengthen your point of view. But it's not really an exchange of truth, because everybody's on the same page.
Correct.
And when you get into those discussions, as we have with our kids about political issues, especially today about social issues, you have to have those differing points of view. And I think the key to that the key to any relationship, whether it's with a parent to a child or between spouses or just acquaintances, is really listening. And it's difficult to do, and I admit I'm still learning. I'm still learning about that.
But I think we do a fairly good job. So we were both raised in homes where our parents did not talk about politics in any way. They believed that it was personal. And so what you did was nobody else's business, who you voted for, what your political beliefs might be. And where we aren't like that with our kids, it's not even that I disagree with that methodology. I think that if you find it personal and nobody's business, then by all means, keep it personal and tell people it's none of their business. But we discuss almost everything with our kids. We wanted to have the kind of relationship where our kids could come to us with any question, concern, or need and know that there was an open forum for that kind of communication. And we're not always successful in being cool about some of the discussions we've had.
We're getting better.
Yeah, well, the older we are, the older our kids are.
Yes.
The more intelligent the conversations become. When your kid is 8 and expressing social views, it's different than when they're 18 and expressing
Very
social views. And a lot of times when they're 8, they're parroting what they heard from someone else, versus 18, where they may be parroting what they've heard from someone else, but they're also backing it up with their own facts or research or points of view that they don't have the wherewithal to do at 8 years old. And two of our kids are definitely more politically and socially involved than the other two.
Well, with Breeze, if
He's 15,
if it's not basketball,
he doesn't
really
care.
talk about it.
No, and
Daisy has her own life, so you know.
I mean, outside for Reese, he's talked some about the social injustices of the world. Almost all of his friends are black, and when they go and walk down a street or whatever, they may be stopped by the police simply because there are 8 black kids and 1 white kid all in a group.
Well, yes.
Yeah, not to get into too much of that. I'm just saying for him, that is about the extent of what he wants to talk about. Why do people do that? Why do people call the police when they see this particular group and not another group? That kind of thing.
Valid questions that
that we have to.
He doesn't understand.
Yeah, and for him, it's more of a conversation, a topic of hearts and where people live and believe, rather than a discussion about social change or anything like that. I think that will come later. I think that will come later with him. But our daughter Daisy, I think that she lives in the now, which is not a bad place, not a bad thing either. So today's today and tomorrow's tomorrow. So where she does,
well, she has a family and you know, not to say that our oldest and our oldest son and our youngest daughter don't have obligations, but Daisy is kind of in a different.
She's in a different
area
place
in life,
yes.
And so while she will make comments, we don't really have those discussions with her.
No,
it's mainly Mason
and
April, and they are definitely more civic minded and politically minded. You know, things that are important to them are different than what's important to us. But I think the important thing is that they're not wrong and we're not right for not sharing in that. So I think the thing that we want to...
They're not wrong.
They're not wrong for not seeing things the way we do, and we're not right because we see things differently than them. We're
not wrong.
Well, nobody's wrong. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. Nobody's wrong. Except for her.
He said we're not right.
She's always wrong.
Well, I'm first wrong.
Don't say it.
I married this one.
Don't say it. See?
Everything went...
See, they're going to think that this is... They're not going to watch now. Reset. Anyway, so yeah, I think I think that's the important thing to remember. That we were talking about this yesterday. And we want to get into how we manage these things with our children because we don't want to stifle them.
Right.
We want them to have the freedom to express themselves in an environment to where you can have healthy debate rather than it turning into some sort of fiasco. And as I said, we were talking about this yesterday, and one of the things that I think is probably the strongest part of our relationship, and it always has been from day one, I mean literally from day one, is communication.
Yes.
There's nothing I haven't told her. Even the things that I don't even want to think about, the cringeworthy things, I share everything with her. And so it's really a foundational pillar of our relationship. But as I was talking to her yesterday about this, I think we can do better because, and I speak mainly for me, and I'm sure she has these difficulties too, but while we're good at talking about everything, sometimes we're not so good at listening because we're too busy thinking about what we want to say in response to what the other person has said, especially when we get into debates and arguments. And we sometimes we want to, as I said before, the way conversations go with a lot of people is I'm going to tell you why I'm right and I'll win if you agree with me. And that seldom happens. So we end up, kind of butting heads. We're like cats in a barrel, And so I think the important thing to do in our relationship, as well as with our kids, is to really listen to what they have to say, because they might have something to say that you didn't know. You might have a lot of things that they say that you don't agree with, but there may be one thing that you can agree upon. And even if you don't find that, you can get something out of the conversation, because now if you're really listening to what they're saying, you know that person better. You know what's close to their hearts. When we're talking about social issues, clearly that's a big topic, recently. Mm-hmm. And talking about political issues, which have been a topic ever since they became aware of politics, you think you know a person, but if you really listen to them, even if you can't agree on anything, you know more about, what's important to that person, what their sensitivities are to environmental issues or social issues, or why they don't like a particular candidate. And while we have a certain amount of experience, and we may not be necessarily idealistic, as idealistic as they are, that doesn't mean that they're wrong. And that's the environment we want to foster.
I think I've said this to my kids, and this is definitely my opinion on our world. I think that our young people are the catalyst for change. They bring awareness to, we get complacent as we get older. We're paying the bills, we're going to work, we're, filling it all in all the blanks because life becomes more linear. And you do become isolated in that you become less aware of some of the more dramatic things going on in the world. And it's not because we don't watch the news or stuff, but it's, that's happening to someone else. You do start becoming, I don't know if boring is the right word, but you have your place in the world, you're fulfilling your place in the world, and you're moving forward in it and doing it. And kids have a different, or young people, I say kids, I call my 25-year-old a kid.
Well, he is to us.
He is to us, but our young people, they are seeing the injustices in the world. And I remember at that age, I felt the same way. I want to change this. This is ridiculous. And they are the people who open our eyes. And then we are the people who make the laws or are effective in making those changes happen if the system was working correctly. They wake us up, essentially. They remind us of what's out there, that it's not just us that it's this whole world thing. I think as you get older, your world does become smaller because, as I said, you get into the pattern of thing, and your friends are your friends, and you don't make more friends. And I know a lot of people quote this, and I have no idea where it's from. And maybe you'll look it up when we're done. But you're more likely to get struck by lightning than to make a new friend after 40. You heard that before?
I've never heard that.
Okay,
I wouldn't necessarily not believe it.
Or you're more likely to be kidnapped than to make a new friend after 40. And the causality, the reason for that kind of saying is because by the time you're 40, you're pretty much in your place. If you're single, you say, okay, I think I'm going to be single. Are you giving me the shut up?
Oh, no. Maybe I am, and I didn't even know it. This is our signal for stop talking and let me talk. It's very useful, I think.
Anyway, if you enter conversations with people who have a different point of view from you with the idea that they can teach you something that you did not know, they may help you move forward to another phase in your life. That they may break you from the complacency of life. But some days you might wake up and go, this is boring, or I thought I would be doing something different, or that kind of thing. And I think that the reason we get into that is because we surround ourselves with people who think like us, talk like us, dress like us, have the same kind of jobs as us, the same economic status, often the same ethnic groups and that kind of thing. And allowing yourself to be open to somebody else's point of view, belief system, not with the idea that they're going to change my mind, but I am going to understand where they're coming from.
And I think it's also kind of counter to what we know of society. If we watch television, or the worst thing is going on social media, because somebody will make a comment and then somebody won't agree with it, which is fine. But then it descends into utter chaos, and things get real ugly, and people start calling each other names, and you label somebody. So there's not a lot of good examples in society as to what true discourse and listening. And I mean, what do we hear about we got together for the holidays and let's not talk politics at the dinner table? Well, why not? Because it turns into, it could turn into a brawl if you're not careful. But if we're really listening, we might actually find 1 out of 50 things that we can agree on, or 1 out of 50 things that you might not think is dispensable or is contemptible, and you might have that light bulb moment.
I think in addition to that, like you were talking about, there's no good examples. You get the almost opposite of that on TV. On the TV.
On the Dumont.
So on TV or in the movies, somebody says, you don't understand, this is my point of view, and the other person goes, you're right, my life has changed forever. Well, that's not a realistic example either. As nice as it would be that somebody could come in and introduce you to an actual intelligent argument that would completely change your mind on a topic, that rarely happens.
Well, please go ahead.
I'm just thinking, in a lot of cases, it's about serious topics, and I'm just thinking about the MASH episode where they do the blood transfusion on do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes. He was a bigot, and now all of a sudden he's all good now.
Yes.
After a couple of days.
And heart-changing events take time. And whether or not you're looking to change your political views or your social views on something is not even the point. Mm-hmm. You get stuck in this thing. I believe this. There actually is a study where they did a brain scan, and this was universal. Democrats and Republicans across the board present them with something that was a fact that directly disagreed or disproved something they believed, and they still would not accept the actual fact. And something lit up in the brain, and again, maybe in post, and we'll see, we can pull up the study where they did these MRIs, what part of the brain actually goes active that resists the truth. And so that is why I say we're saying when you go in to listening, it's also with the position, I'm going to understand what they're saying. I'm not going to say my point of view is the only point of view. And no matter what you say, you're not going to be able to convince me. My kids have changed my opinions on things by presenting me with a fact. Going online, finding a legitimate source. Sometimes the source is, like, if you showed me something from Fox News and something from CNN, I would dismiss both of those. You have to find me a study or other, it's just the nature of the world today. Everything feels biased. But there have been times where my kids have just pulled a study offline. They know my background is in research, so I will respond more to hard facts. And I think we all need to be open to being presented with somebody else's truth.
Yeah, and it's the video that I was talking about watching. I don't know if it's practical in every situation, but it is an interesting thought. And it's basically there to test your listening skills. So if you're in a conversation or you're in a debate with somebody, the suggestion or the exercise was to make a rule that stipulates that you can speak up for yourself after you have gone back and clearly defined what the other person has said accurately, and that what you're determining the other person said has to be agreed on by the other person. And what this does is it helps you to comprehend exactly what they're saying. Not like a straw man argument, because we've been in arguments before where I'll say, you did this and I don't think it was right, and then she'll go, well, I guess I'm wrong all the time. No, that's not what we're talking about. But what it does is it helps you to really comprehend what the other person is saying. And it also is good because some people don't express themselves very well. And you really have to listen to what they're saying in order to understand what they're saying. And in some cases, you'll actually make their argument for them, because maybe they're not good at expressing themselves, but they have a point that they want to make. Maybe you're better expressing yourself than they are. So if you're really listening to them and you go, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is, and whatever it is, you might actually make their argument stronger, and then you can respond. Now, that doesn't work in every situation. No. I understand that. But it is an interesting thing to consider, and it's something to try from time to time, because contemplating and understanding what a person is saying, whether you agree with them or not, can open the door for, I think, a more cordial discourse. Yes. Where we can talk, because clearly, I'll use this as an example, the George Floyd incident. Now, I think where us and our kids all come together is that we think it was a terrible thing. And we could go on and on about that, and I don't really want to do that in this show. But we can agree that it's a terrible thing. But the response to that is going to differ, sometimes generationally. Our kids are... what was the protest that April went to in Washington? Was it the Trayvon Martin?
No, she went...
The guns thing? It was something.
Oh, yes, it was. It was the gun.
Okay,
so... Yes.
So, and she went with the school group, to Washington to protest something about handguns. I think it was after the Trayvon Martin.
Really, the protest was to.
Or was it a school shooting? I can't remember. I think it
Actually,
was
it was a school shooting.
It was after the.
Sorry that we're totally like. No clue. It was a school shooting, and the kids were saying enough is enough. We have to regulate.
It was the Parkland.
Yes, we have to regulate gun control.
Yeah.
That was what the March in Washington was about.
So she went to that, and it was a school group.
It was not a school outing.
No,
it was just a group from school
with teachers as chaperones. And
yes,
they had the tour bus set up and everything, and so she went, and we caught a little bit of flack from some people online. We won't say who, but we did. And the question was, how could you let her do that? And I'm like, well, look, where I might think that my personal feeling is protests are a good place to start, but unfortunately, I think a lot of things today, they're where they end as well. And I think protests are good as long as they're not violent. They're good. This First Amendment in action, and if it jams up traffic a little bit, so be it. But my feeling is it shouldn't end there.
And it typically does.
And it does for the most part. And our kids are probably, they protest and then they hand it off to somebody else. And my opinion would be, okay, protest and then go out and make the change. Mm-hmm. Go be part of that. Protesting is good, but it doesn't end there. Well, that's kind of where we might disagree a little bit. But at any rate, she went, and
I was proud of her.
And yeah, I mean, I would have probably gone a different way. I'm not saying protesting is bad or that I didn't support it, but we got a little heat from that. And honestly, as long as I feel like the protests are going to be orderly, then I don't have a problem with that. Now, she wants to go to protests like some of the ones that have been going on lately.
Well,
where
she's
they get
18
violent.
now, so she
can
understand.
But if she was younger and she was going to a protest that had been violent in the past or was currently in the midst of violent outbreaks, I'd say no. Because as a parent, I'm charged with her well-being and safety. But in terms of how she feels, even if I not that I don't totally disagree with it, but even if we differ on that, that's her decision.
We're not raising miniature versions of ourselves, and I think that is where we diverge from a lot of our friends and family. Not everybody, by any means. I know plenty of people who are trying to raise versions of themselves. This is my belief system, therefore this is your belief system, and hopefully you'll carry that on to your children and so on. And I think I was fortunate to be raised in a family where that was not how we were raised. It was definitely a conservative family, but even living in it, I didn't realize we were a conservative family because my parents did not get on a soapbox and, like I said, talk politics. I was raised in church and on a lot of religious beliefs, so therefore you can kind of say probably conservative. But what that meant is me and my siblings were all slightly different in how we are. I tend to be more moderate, the most of everybody. More moderate with more liberal leanings, especially for social care, for social systems.
Communist.
Oh, yes. And actually, in our family members, we have been called liberals. Because our very conservative friends and family feel that we're liberal. But our very liberal friends and family feel like we're conservative.
We're people without a political home. We're political.
So I would say that makes us moderates.
Yeah.
But my point is that I want my kids to make their own choices when it comes to their political standings.
As parents, we want our children to be able to express themselves in a manner that is welcoming to that, even if we don't agree with it. Now, if they're talking about doing something illegal, or it's really way down the moral scale, we're going to say something,
yes,
because it's our responsibility as parents. But in terms of them having different opinions, we want them to feel like they can talk about that without arguments. We're not always successful, but we're trying to do better.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that we're not always successful in handling what they might say well. And often it's because one of them might make a blanket statement, and that will piss me off. I mean, it's just my nature, and it'll turn into an argument instead of a discussion. And the nice thing about our family is that we can actually get into a fight, slam our doors, stomp away, and then an hour later come back together and have another go at it. The kids know they can come and say, I'm sorry I said it this way, or I can say to them, I'm sorry I said it this way, and let's start again. And the thing that Rich mentioned earlier about, this is what I heard you say, that is an incredibly great tool when you're misunderstanding.
And it's very difficult to do. It might be one of the most difficult things that you'll do when it comes to communication.
Well,
but if you can do that,
the thing with that is, like, if I get mad at something April says, and that's usually the child of ours that I will bash heads with the most, is I will hear maybe not what she's actually meaning to say, because she comes in with a tone, or she says something blanket, like, you always fill in the blank, which is terrible. I don't always do anything except for maybe breathe, and until you better stop. But the point is, I will tell her, what I heard you say was this, and that gives her the opportunity to say, no, you misunderstood my intent, and what I was trying to say was this. And it's a wonderful tool. It's when you listen with the intent to tell the person what you're hearing, to give them the opportunity to clarify, or to say, yes, now you got it. And with, I think I mentioned in another episode, with Daisy's depression, because I don't suffer from that, and even when I have depression from time to time, it is temporary. Like, I'm just going to get out of bed and get going, and it'll just go away on its own. And that really helped me to understand the depths of the feelings that she was having in a way that I never could before, because she got the opportunity to fully express it. I could say, this is what I'm hearing, and am I understanding that right? And she could say, no, you don't. You're not quite getting it. And even though that's a different topic, it's the same principle. And this is not just a principle for your kids. If you have a friend you're not talking to right now because your political beliefs differ, because they like Trump and you don't, maybe it's time to open that door again and have a conversation and see where they're coming from. It's hard when somebody thinks Trump walks on water to have that conversation. But sometimes somebody likes Trump because they like they liked his economic policies and nothing else. But you've closed that door because they said they're voting for Trump.
Yeah.
That is just an example.
Try to be apolitical on this show.
Yes, this is not. This is not about whether or not we love or hate Trump. This is more the volatile feelings that this particular president tends to bring up. I know people who have unfriended people because they did or did not like Trump. Like, if you can't agree with me on this, we cannot be friends. And that does speak to the depth of your relationship anyway.
That's not a relationship. And you're just two people with your hands around each other's necks. You're not, that's not a relationship.
No.
Where we really butt heads most of the time is in just those average conversations.
Yes.
And that's where those extreme responses come, where you unfriend somebody on Facebook. You don't talk to them again because, they're a registered Republican and you're a registered Democrat, or vice versa. Those things happen, and it's a shame. And I just think, we don't listen. And when you do, everybody's better for it. I mean, if you can come away from a conversation where you find something out about that person you didn't know, or maybe they taught you something that you didn't know, you're smarter. You might not run into some of the problems that you run into after hearing what somebody has to say. And everybody comes away better, and why wouldn't you want to have those conversations?
I get a lot of that with our daughter, April. We have some wonderful conversations. She is very focused on the environment, and she is worried about our environmental future. Why aren't people recycling more? Why do people get so up in arms when somebody says, recycle your bags or recycle your aluminum? And I don't understand. I can't answer that question, actually. Why is it a big deal? Why is it a big deal to say I want to protect my planet? But some of the things that she's taught me, and this is a little off topic, but even the day before yesterday, we've had a lot of conversations with her about global warming, or that the warming of the planet is actually cyclical. It's a natural part of the planet's life cycle. What's happening, though, right now is that it's happening faster than it ever did before. And that is where paths diverge.
Well, that's your opinion.
Well, no, that's not what I'm talking about anyway. But one of the things that this has an impact on is sea life. And April says to me, did you know that sea turtles, the sex of the baby sea turtle is determined by the temperature? Did you know? I didn't know that. I was not aware. And the warmer the temperatures, the more females are born. And in this last cycle, there were almost no male sea turtles born. Well, you know what that means. That means there's going to be less sea turtles, and less and less and less, until there are no more sea turtles. I was amazed at this information. I didn't know. She taught me something. I didn't go in with I told you the earth warming is cyclical. I went in with, what do you mean we're having a problem? And explain it to me. And it's an amazing piece of information to me. And I learned something new, and I realized this is not groundbreaking or earth-shattering or world-changing for everything, but it is important to her. And she taught me something and made me realize there's more than just, we might get some flooding in 2,000 years. Or I know I'm making up numbers now, but that's not the only consequence of what's happening right now. The consequences exceed that. And we might not see sea turtles anymore. And I don't know what that means for the ecosystem, but that could be another conversation.
Yeah, well, I think it just highlights what happens when you actually listen. And you say, I know it's not earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but maybe in a sense it is, because it doesn't happen enough.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of our advice today. Really listen. It may be very difficult to do because you might be talking to people, especially people you have long-term relationships with, like your spouse, like your children, like your parents or your siblings or whoever it is. But even co-workers and friends and whatnot, they may say some of the weirdest things. And they may say things that you could not disagree with anymore. But if you listen to them, really listen to them, and avoid reactionary statements, avoid straw man arguments, and go into the conversation, especially when you know it's going to be more of a debate than anything, that maybe there's something that they know that I don't know. Or maybe there's something I can learn about that person through their expression of their beliefs that I didn't know about before. And you can walk away from that conversation, both people being extremely well informed and better off than before you had the conversation. And that's a great thing.
I will say that when somebody says something ridiculous, it is our nature to focus in, to hyper-focus on that one thing, even though that might not even be the crux of their whole argument, or might be just a very tiny little thing in the whole shebang. And when you start focusing on that thing, you're no longer listening. You're no longer hearing everything they have to say. In addition, it is important, if you want to develop relationships with other people, that you don't go in with the idea that you might be, one, convincing them of something, or two, that they will listen to you in the same way you listen to them. And this is where the love part comes in my opinion. When you love someone else, you take them as they are. That's part of love. And sometimes that means I know that I could speak to them till blue in the face and they will never hear me. But that doesn't mean I can't hear them, or I can't love them and show them that love. Often that is the thing that opens the door to something more fruitful in the future. And I want to thank you for watching this far. I know we got off topic from time to time, and I hope you learned something.
I did. Hey, look, as she said, thanks for watching. If you like what you hear, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the like
down
button.
there. It's down there.
Somewhere
it
down there.
It says subscribe.
You can't miss it. And there's a bell that says like, and make a comment. Even if it has, obscenities, it's okay.
Try not to use obscenities.
If you can. Well, anyway, I think that's it for this week. So we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you
next time.
Bye.